Yeah. That's the end. This one, for some reason, has got the least leaves and the most fruit.
It's weird, eh?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, where do we start? DWC.
Why am I here?
Yeah, why are you here?
What's going on?
Why am I here? Actually, my son Ollie asked me this morning. He's like, "Dad, why are you doing this?
Why are you doing
this?" And I said, "Well, it's actually, number one, it's fun for me." And I said to him, it's like running a running race. Why do you do running races? You don't have to do races. You can just run on your own if you want. Why do you sign up to do a race? And it's obviously fun to be part of something like bigger, community-wise. It's like, it's not on your own. You can obviously do a run anytime you want. But running a race is just more of a chaos, like, together. Also because it's a discipline. Like, you choose to sign up for it. It forces you to do it. You know? Whereas if you just go for a run, you just run. You may not run, I don't feel like it today, you know. So I think that's also why I always include it in my calendar.
It fascinates me too. I mean, the thing that fascinates me about this is to really understand someone's design process, because I think the creative process is something that that's really interesting to me. And looking across different disciplines, whether you're designing, a chair or a sideboard or a car or a house, how someone got to that point is a fascinating thing for me, because my point of view is that there's nothing really fundamentally new in the world, right? Like we're building on what's gone before, and I like asking those kind of questions to figure out where have you been before, what have your influences been, and where this process is taking you to the thing that you're going to design, which I don't know what it is, because this is a bit of a secret. You said to me, come along, I want you to be part of Design Week. I mean, I'm super honored to be part of it. But it gives me cool insights into someone I know reasonably well, and whose products I love. I mean, I own some of your stuff, so I feel like I'm kind of invested in this anyway.
That is cool. I mean, I think that's definitely why I invited you, to be part of it, because I've always valued your opinion and I've known that you both work in the space, but you also love the space of creativity and design, and you've got a intrinsic you're invested, deeply invested in the success of the industry. But for me also, I think I share the same intrigue of where do our ideas come from? What is the essence of these ideas? Because I always think it's so interesting how we have access to the same stuff. The materials that we've got here, the machines we've got here, they're not unique, they're not new. I mean, the technology is not new. The CNC machines, we've had them for 10 years and they've been around for probably more than that, another 10. So it's not like we're sitting with some sort of cutting edge technology that's making us have this edge, And so that really pushes me, that thought, we all have access to the same stuff. So what is it about creativity that separates us, that sets us apart? What do we see differently? And I think, I find this so fascinating for myself and for other people. I'm just always interested in that creative process. What actually gets you to something unique and different? How did you get there? I think one of the ways is the discipline of doing it. It's the discipline of
the repetitiveness of doing it.
Submitting yourself to
a daily discipline of
back to the running. If you want to run a race, then you've got to train.
You've got to put in the hard work.
Put in the work, and you don't feel like it, but you do it, and then you look at the results. When you do the race, you're like, amazing,
Do you feel surprised by that when you get to the results?
Yeah. Every time.
Okay.
I'm always I always look back and go how did we get here? And then I can kind of track back, and it's often very zigzag, the road, but you can, and I actually like to do this for myself when I look at other designers' work. I look at the finished product and I try and imagine how they got there. I try and actually reverse engineer the creative process. They made that choice, they made this choice, they had this limitation, whatever the limitations were, and then I kind of try and figure out what was the original seed idea, because that's then how you can judge the design. Not necessarily whether you like it or whether it's your taste, but more just was this original idea something worthy, something interesting,
worth pursuing. Because there are strict parameters in what you can do, right? I mean, if you're designing, for example, a chair, there's very specific sizes and ergonomics that you've got to deal with. There's also the materiality of it. There's only so much you can do with wood, with laser cut metal. So it's I find that fascinating when you essentially cut down when a designer works with a smaller color palette, call it that, smaller amounts of tools and parameters to still design something that's unique and interesting within the parameters of 4 legs or 3 legs and a backing. So that I think is a real challenge for any creative person, is to have a cut down amount of tools and a palette to work with and still produce something that's interesting.
I think that's the thing with the palette, is that you need the limitations, because otherwise, like, I think 99% of ideas die at that state of, like, they don't get finished.
Yeah.
Tons of people have got great ideas and they work on them forever. And actually what they do is they overcraft the idea because they don't, like, commit and say this is good enough. And so they just refine it and refine it. And actually the net result is they've designed like 10 items, 10 chairs, instead of one. They had one chair that was original and different and unique. And then through a process of almost like over crafting, maybe they wanted it to be perfect and they hadn't let go of that. Like, there's never something perfect.
That's such a key part of the creative process, and a flippin' fascinating one.
Yeah.
And I have it if I'm writing something.
Yeah.
Like, when do I know when it's finished? Because you can sit and polish and craft.
When the time has run out.
So how do you know? Is it that? Is it timing?
That's why this works so well, like having a week format, because it releases the pressure.
Okay.
Some people say, like, geez, that's a lot of pressure, but actually no, it's what is possible to do within a week. Like, actually releases the pressure to say, like, well, you can, like, a chair you could work on for a year, and when at the end it will be a bloody amazing chair. But like, if you only have a week, then like you immediately just go, well, look, this is what we could do within a week. The constraint was like imposed on us, or we accepted the constraint, and in a way that like reduces the pressure, the anxiety of like, is this thing done? Is it good enough? You're like, well, it was good enough within the time frame.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big things of like letting go of judging ourselves or judging others about like what was their thinking around this product. Like, you actually need to know what was the brief. Was it like they only had a week to do it in, or did they only have a certain amount of money or a certain amount of materials to use or a certain amount of time within to finish? Because then, like, if you judge it according to that, and that's what I do when I look back at like old historic furniture, I always just think to myself, like, what were their limitations? Like, how much wood did they have? How expensive was the wood to them? Like, one piece of wood, like, was that all they could afford to use for this? Or what tools did they have? How much time did they have? Like, I think about, like, if you go further back, like people who were very busy farming, making stuff, their food depended on their physical toil, the sweat, so they couldn't sit there and like just dream for days and days and be like, this chair is going to have curves, and they were like, listen, I've got to get back to the field. I've got like a little bit of time now, and that limitation like created this, in my mind, it actually created possibility. It's like the opposite.
I mean, so for designing like that, it's purely practical, right? What materials do I have? What tools do I have? What can I do? And then it looks in a certain way. Do you think there was an aesthetic in that, like a design choice, or was it just driven by practical? If I look at your toolbox range and where that comes from and that style of Cape furniture, do you think that was purely a physical thing, practical thing, or do you think there was an aesthetic involved in the design of that?
I think that it was rooted in practicality, because like they couldn't necessarily afford more than that, so there was a much more of a deep rooting in practicality. And then there was like a top layer of like, hey, let's have a bit of fun with this element. Like, hey, we've crafted this enough. Like, this is sturdy enough. Okay. Whatever. What if we introduced like a little touch? It wasn't like this over the top kind of ornate like carving that would take you months and months and months. But it was still this human creative part, which is like, hey, I still want this to reflect my personal taste or my personal style or my signature as a craftsman. And you see that. You see, like, and I think it's such a nice metered out. It's not this like, look at me, I can make the most ornate thing. It's more of like, I've made this thing that is humble and solid, and I've added this like, this little bit of signature, this bit of fun, or this bit of beauty, or and I think that's kind of cool. It's sort of what happened if you look at like when the world kind of got lost in too much ornate, too much added on layers, like what about this, what about that, and it got like too soft and puffy and all the extra layers and layers and layers. And then in a way, like, when is it finished? I don't know. There's just a never-ending amount of layers.
Do you think that as a designer now in 2024, nearly 2025, that you still have that ability to design something like someone who's designing those early Cape chairs, for example. That is, it's practicality first, and you can add a subtle layer that you were talking about of your own stuff. Or are you like, you're knee deep in your own aesthetic already, and you have to be true to that?
I think that we still do because of price. Because the longer it takes to make something, the more it costs us, or the more materials. And I think our aesthetic is rooted in I always talk about rationality. Like for me, that is the strongest guiding word in our work. Like like if you ask me for one word that describes our range or my whole career up to this point, I would say it's like I value rationality so much.
What do you mean by that? Is it simplicity in design?
I think a rational approach actually leads you like to answers. So if you're sitting at a fork in the road, whether you're choosing between one material and another material, or one thickness and another thickness, you just say, well, what's the rational choice here? Like, what is thick enough to be strong but not too thick that it's a waste of material? So that's rooted in a rational design. What will be strong enough to last a long time? It's a rational choice. It's maybe not necessarily the most aesthetic choice. It's a choice about like, I want this to be using the least amount of materials for the job, but having the longest amount of life in the product, as well as aesthetically. I think like aesthetic rationality, people talk about that as like, I mean, a lot of Scandinavian aesthetic is, I think, actually a misnomer. It's actually rational design.
Right.
It's just a phrase that's used in marketing. It's like, wow, Scandinavian lines. But actually Scandinavian design is rooted in rationality. The people were simple people living in rural conditions, making rational furniture. The timber was hard to get, hard to work with, like basic machinery, basic tools. No one was being wasteful. The thickness of Scandinavian furniture is considered very thin, and if you compare that to some of the other stuff from around the world, if you look at like early Scandinavian design, you find that the timber was like a lot of the tabletops are like 13 or 14 mil thick, which is considered super thin. And a lot of people like associate value with like thick, heavy, but actually they were looking at it going, well, this is thick enough to do the job. Why would I waste more of my timber if I think this is thick enough?
You also then have to be quite knowledgeable about structural engineering in a way, if that's the right term, to know what loads it can bear. So you've got to think quite carefully about that as well, the scarcity of material or whatever. But it's quite, I never thought about that, but I mean, I think roughly, I think the sort of Cape style furniture that the Toolbuck range is based on kind of comes from those same principles, right? It might be a little thicker and a bit more rough hewn maybe, but it's basically the same stuff is driving it. And
I think that kind of, for me, what's great about that is that there's no way to guarantee that you're going to like something in the future, right? You hope so,
right?
But ultimately, like, we buy something, you might, whether it's a car or anything, you look at it and you like it right now, that's why you're buying it. But the chances of you liking in the future are actually not a guarantee, right?
Yes.
Like, you hope so because you want to be, careful with your money and stuff. But actually, there's no way to know for sure if you don't like it. And I think that one of the ways to like, maybe it's a better chance of success for the future is this a rational choice? Like, because if it's not rational, there's a high chance that you're not going to like it in the future. It's going to be based on Steve today, right? If this is not like rationally a good idea, it's just like what I feel like right now. I just want this thing, It's fine, but in 5 years' time, you may not want that thing the way you want it today, Whereas if there's a rationality to it, there's like a really good chance that you're still going to look at it and go like, wow, this thing still serves me. This is still good, And I think like for our work, like we've never wanted to be fashion. We've never wanted to be considered like the trend for today. We've always wanted to be like, no, this is about a long-term view, And it should be, because if you make something well, it's going to last a long time. So you don't want to actually make stuff well that people don't like in the future,
I think look, I think the design being timeless is a key thing, especially in furniture, I think. But there seems to be, I also am fascinated about the lifespan of a design, and when does it, as you say, it looks immediate and relevant now, but soon it doesn't, and that's a fast fashion kind of thing. There seems to be two ways to get that. Either you design something that's pretty timeless straight out the gate, right? And it's driven by rationality and it's simple, or it's
that's in. Not everything lasts, eh?
Behind the scenes, family.
Bricks on the wrong side. Bricks on this side for the wind.
Oh, actually, the wind blows both ways, though.
We don't want to fall into you guys.
There we go.
Because it has definitely been going in. Yeah, too. Maybe the wind's changed direction.
The wind's freaking out.
Comes through that gap over there.
Yeah.
Baghdad, the Baghdad gap.
It's might go again. That was a really big conversation. Sorry.
It's part of unscripted conversations, unscripted outcomes.
Some bloopers.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. The bricks are a good addition. You were saying something though.
Yeah, so what I was saying before we were blown over is that great design needs to stand the test of time for me. And it strikes me that there are two ways to get there. Either you design something that's timeless and it's driven by rationality, and I think Scandinavian aesthetic is probably part of that, and there's a bunch of other designs. But the other thing, which I also find interesting, and maybe more of a challenge for a designer, is to design something that's pretty out there and avant-garde. And it doesn't, you look at it now and you think like, what is that? And then in 10 years time you look at it and you think like, wow, that was visionary. That was really interesting and it's almost like the prescient in knowing where something was going. So I think there's two ways of getting there.
It's true,
I think your challenge is going to be, I think the first bit is the easy bit for you.
Yeah, it is.
I think the second bit is harder.
100%. I think that's why you're here actually. Because I think that is, I've spent my whole career so far working on the rational end, where it's like almost frugal, it's like a high value on frugality. And actually I think I totally agree. Like if you look at something, one of the most inspiring pieces for me that I've never been able to make, or I've never tried to make, is those little old headrests, like from a deep African roots, curved headrests. People would like lie with them just under their head, and nowadays you find them in antique shops. People use them as footstools and stuff. I just think that they're so cool. It's such a cool piece, and so like they're so ornate and so special. The carvings are always like really interesting, and that to me, when I look at those, like I can picture like, because again there was a more rational way of getting to that piece. So they didn't need all of that stuff, And I often look at those and I feel like, wow, that is like I don't even have to like it. I just have to like, I can really appreciate like how like this was so visionary for the moment. It must have been like out there, like some guy sitting going like, wow, I'm gonna do it this way, I'm gonna carve it like,
Because design can elevate things, and it should. You can design a headrest, for example, that's purely ergonomic and that's it. But by adding some subtle details, whatever it's going to be, it's going to elevate it. And that's what makes it desirable. It moves it from almost like an appliance, like the kettle I switch on and off, it has that function in my life, to something that I appreciate visually. And that's what design can be.
Another thing for me on this topic is that what always amazes me is how many times you can skin the same cat, and I don't know what that is. I think that is deep creativity. It's the essence of creativity. It's not just a superfluous kind of layer. I think that like, and I don't know if any of us fully understand what creativity actually is. Like, it's so deeply wired in us. Like, why are we able to do this? How are we able to do it? Like, what makes something more creative than something else? What is that all about? And it's so deep. It's like such a deep mine, And what like often hits me with that is I can look at the same material. And I had this experience like a few months ago. I was in Denmark at this design, 3 days of design. And I remember looking at a particular chair. I can't even remember what the chair looked like, but I just stood there and I like got completely transfixed by this chair because of the way they'd used this 25mm tube, or 25 or 32mm tube. It's a tube size that we use here all the time. It's like, it's part of our library. We work with it every day, And I've been working with it for a long time. And I still looked at this and I was like, they've used it in another way. I've never thought of using it in that way. And I had like a full-on moment of such deep inspiration. Like, how you can suddenly just go like, like a flipping quadruple espresso, like just shot myself in the brain. Or like, how is it that like creativity is so deep that we can still keep finding new ways to work with the same boring kind of material in another possible ways to imagine it, like, And I think that is just such a cool thing about this type of process, like creative process. Like you actually can't ever afford to be like, I've done it all, I'm bored with this, like I need it. And maybe there are seasons where you got to go like, I need something new, I need a new technology, or I need a new machine or something to open up avenues. Other times I think you just have to give it more time to look at something and try and look at it in a new way, and then find like, you know, like that particular thing was just like, my mind just literally
So was it
melted.
like a subtle?
Subtle,
okay.
super subtle, just like, okay, I've never thought of using a pipe in that particular way.
Why do you think
And
you never thought of that?
I think we just get quite conditioned to the ways, and that's why for me, like our approach has always been so linked to production, because we are right at the front, literally, of how the materials come out of our machines, and so we have such a deep connection to that process that we can constantly, and it happens like week in, week out, we're constantly refining how we make stuff. You know, it's maybe the same machine and the same materials, but it's coming out differently. We're finding new ways to put like clever tricks or clever technology into the parts that we didn't know was possible before. And I think that being so close to production actually gives us that front seat on like a new possible way. Like here, for example, when we're bending our tubes, we often will laser cut them first and then bend them, which is like quite a counterintuitive process to do. Normally you would bend all the stuff and then, you know, and then have to try and afterwards cut holes and slots and stuff. And then we figured out there's some ways to trick the machine in a way to laser cut it first, you know, and it creates some steps, but it gives you creatively like a whole new canvas, you know. If we hadn't had that machine here, we wouldn't have known, because no supplier would have done that for us.
Right.
There's no way they, you know, when it's their machines, they're like, no, we're not doing it any other way, you know.
Last question.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
So I'm very, where do we go from here? I'm very keen to know how we start. I can tell you what my expectations, not my expectations, that's really unfair. What my challenge to you is going to be. It's going to be to not add a smaller layer of something onto what you do. It's going to be to like push the boat out.
Okay.
Like that'd be cool for me to see. I mean, I love your stuff fundamentally, and I understand the aesthetic and I appreciate it. But I'd love to see something like where you like push the boat out for, and then maybe bring it back. Yeah. But like that would be interesting.
That's a
for
cool
me.
challenge.
Yeah. But I don't know what you have in mind though.
Yeah, I actually haven't got anything in mind. But as you're saying that, I'm starting to picture like forms that I don't normally use.
Yeah, like some,
which is cool.
Like, tell me, get into not quite the same space you were at UTC Trail Race, where you were full body cramping and in all kinds of pain. But you said when we were talking about that earlier, it was an uncomfortable space for you to be in. Yeah. So like, I'd say to you, get into an uncomfortable design space.
Okay. That's cool. I like that challenge.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no idea where we're gonna go. And like for me, I think that's part of the magic of this. Like I love being able to be directed. It's like being a gun for hire, you know. Yeah. Like it's like just gonna go and do the job now, you know. And people are gonna kind of like help guide us. But I'm inspired by that. I like that idea. Like push it out a bit further.
Because you can always bring it back, you know. Like so don't design something safe.
Yeah. Have you got a particular scenario in whether it's the home or in life? Yeah. Because we don't have to limit ourselves here to anything. Okay. Have you got a particular scenario, like a space or a moment that you would like to see something designed for?
No, not particularly. I was thinking chair, because I have, as you know, we both have an interest in cars, and I'm interested in car design. Yeah. And there you've got very specific parameters, right? Car design is really determined by aerodynamics, it's determined by space inside, and it's determined by pedestrian safety. And that's your car size, and you've got to design something interesting within that. Yeah. Now, for me, like a chair is that. A chair is going to have the same ergonomics. Yeah. It is the standard canvas. Like I'm interested in what you could do to like really push a boundary of a chair for you.
Wow, that's cool.
Do you think that's possible?
Anything's possible, eh? Yeah. I mean, I think the chairs are notoriously hard. Yeah. Like designers generally do only a few of them in their careers, but I'm not sure why that is. Because obviously, like, I think I know why that is. I can tell you. Like, I think that a lot of the time with chairs, there's practical things that have to be considered. Yeah. That's fine. Ergonomics and stuff, that's fine. But usually where chairs run aground is when they try and make them into Swiss Army knives. Like, for example, needs to be very robust, super lightweight. Okay, so you're already trading off.
Yeah,
And then it also needs to be stackable.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like another level of trade-off now. And then you say, yeah, but it needs to be super comfortable as well for like a 4-hour seating at a restaurant, you know, not just a 30 minutes in a cafe kind of thing. So all of those like kind of end up making the Swiss Army knife of chairs, which is just why they run aground, actually. So if we limit ourselves in some of those spaces, then like a chair for a particular moment.
Do you think that's not going to work for this challenge then, realistically?
It might work, yeah.
Okay.
I think it can work, yeah. One of the areas that I've been...
well, let me ask you this. What did you have in mind? What would you prefer to design as well?
I quite like not knowing.
Okay.
I quite enjoy... I think because the whole year round I'm working on what I know, and I'm like, kind of have a list of things that I'm working towards. And this is quite nice to just to be told, hey, go and design this thing. Okay, I can follow orders, you know, I like that. Because the rest of the year I'm like creating my own orders, you know. But there is a particular moment, it'll be interesting if everyone agrees with this idea, but I quite enjoy the space of low chairs, like lower than the normal height.
Yeah.
Because I think we sit really well like that. I actually sit, like my favorite spot is to sit like this.
Yeah.
I can sit like this for days. I'm like most comfortable. Like it's my like.
Okay, definitely not for me.
It's my deep roots.
Not my vibe at all.
Really?
No. But I think it's because I'm older than you. My knees are a bit sore.
Do you know that like this, being able to sit low down and get up from that is one of the things, like mobility predictors for longevity. So you've got to work on it.
Okay.
You've got to work on it. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be that low. But like, because it's a change of pace.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not this like sitting back on the couch thing. It's not the sitting formal on like a dining chair. It's like a little bit of a different moment.
Yeah.
I often find like if I sit down on the floor, I have like a different way of thinking about stuff because you're just seeing everything quite differently. You're at a totally different plane.
So are we talking about like low, like as in some of those beach chairs, like that kind of low?
Like a early, I'm thinking like a meditation stool.
Yeah, okay.
Like where you're sitting in like a lower position to create a different frame of mind.
Yes.
Like, to help to promote like a change of
okay. I think that's brilliant. I mean, that fits into my thing, like reimagine a chair.
Okay.
That's great.
Cool.
Okay.
It's been on my mind for a few years, like on and off. So maybe that is what we're gonna do.
That's a challenge, eh?
I like that.
Okay.
I like that.
You're grounded.
Yeah.
A grounded chair.
Yeah.
Eh?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
On the dot, how fast?
Oh wow. Just look at us.